Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. As farmers staged protests outside the residence of President Emmanuel Macron and across France, the French government has called for a Christmas truce with protesting farmers after more than a week of demonstrations over cattle lumpy skin disease policies and the EU-Mercosur trade deal. Pope Leo has appointed the Bishop Richard Moth as the new Archbishop of Westminster in UK, replacing Cardinal Vincent Nichols after his mandatory retirement. This appointment comes as Catholicism gains ground among worshippers in England and Wales amid warming ties between Rome and London following a historic joint prayer. Bangladesh's interim government has urged calm after the killing of a popular student leader sparked violent protests, with media offices and political and cultural sites torched as security forces deployed across Dhaka ahead of elections. The unrest comes less than 2 months before the February 12 vote amid current instability. Taiwan's media reports that 9 people were injured, and among them 4 are critically injured after a suspect released smoke bombs at a Taipei subway station and then attacked bystanders. Taiwan Premier Cho Jong-tai has confirmed the attack in Taipei, as motives of the attacker remains unclear. French President Emmanuel Macron says that Europe may need to re-engage in direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin if US-led efforts to broker a Ukraine peace deal fail, while warning that Europe is being sidelined. Greece's Coast Guard has rescued about 545 migrants from a fishing boat off of the island of Gavdos, one of the largest migrant arrivals in recent months. The Greek Coast Guard has said they were found during a search operation some 16 nautical miles south of Gavdos and is being transported safely to the port. According to an official from Ukraine's SBU, Ukrainian aerial drones struck a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in the Mediterranean Sea for the first time. Hitting the vessel can drill more than 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine and causing critical damage, marking a significant escalation once again. French lawmakers have failed to agree on a 2026 budget compromise, raising the risk of emergency legislation to roll over spending and avoid a shutdown after a joint committee collapsed talks, while central bank governor Francois Villeroy de Galhou has warned such a stopgap could widen the deficit. Now for this hour, we start with Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for unity with Poland. Zelensky has warned that Moscow could target Poland if Russia's invasion is not stopped. He stressed the importance of both nations' independence. He said Ukraine and Poland must stand together to deter further attacks. The remarks came during a press conference with Polish counterpart Karol Nawrocki. Zelensky has emphasized the shared responsibility to protect their sovereignty. Let's listen into what the Ukrainian president has shared.
Польща прийняла багатьох українців після початку вторгнення. Ми вдячні за це. Пам'ятаємо, як це було. Бувають часом непрості моменти в наших суспільствах, але ми, як президенти, ми маємо визначати таку політику, яка підтримує нас разом. Без належності України, без незалежності нашої держави Москва неминуче прийде сюди, піде далі в Європу. Без нашої незалежності Москва неминуче прийде за Польщу.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Professor, now, what more can you tell us after hearing Polish leader and Zelensky emphasized the need to counter Russia now than more than ever before.
Well, this, on the part of the Polish leader, this is classic deterrence talk. Do not attack us. And on President Zelensky's part, this is again trying to heighten the sense of fear and concern in NATO that Russia might, once it succeeds, if it succeeds in Ukraine, might then attack Poland or the Baltics. I think this is exaggeration for diplomatic effect. There is no way in which Russian tanks are going to be rolling towards Warsaw or rolling into Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia. The Russian army is pretty much exhausted. That would trigger Article 5. Russia would be at war with the United States within about 5 minutes. There is no upside to this. So a conventional military attack on NATO Europe is really inconceivable in strategic terms. What is more plausible, and perhaps what Zelensky is warning about, is attacks in the so-called gray zone, probing the border, crossing into NATO airspace, and then plausible deniability afterwards, cyber attacks, disinformation attacks, those sorts of things. That's become the norm, and Russia has become very good at those hybrid warfare tactics. That's something that NATO has to be concerned about. But the prospect of a massive armored attack into Poland or the Baltics, that's exaggeration for diplomatic effect.
Yes. Do you think this is also, like you said, it's very typical of a Polish leader to say something like this? Doesn't it spread fear instead of unity? What do you think?
Well, there is a divide of sorts between Eastern and Western Europe within NATO. The Eastern countries, for obvious reasons, are much more concerned, and they're trying to galvanize diplomatic support within NATO, and perhaps beyond as well, but certainly within NATO, to the extent that they can present a united front that says an attack on one is an attack on all. Do not attack the Baltics. Do not attack Poland. That's likely, they hope, to convince Vladimir Putin not to attack. This is standard deterrence posturing. It's important. We have the weapons, we have the military manpower, we have the will, and that's the important message here. We have the collective will to defy you, Mr. Putin, and your Russian army, and that changes his calculus. He sees very little upside to attacking if he knows he's going to be facing a unified NATO. So that's what I mean by diplomatic posturing or signaling for effect. Really underlining, underscoring the deterrent posture of NATO and communicating to Vladimir Putin, do not attack us because the costs will far exceed any benefits.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Latham for sharing that insight all the way from Minneapolis. Please stay with us as we come back to you for a later discussion as well. Now, moving the focus on to U.S. In an interview, U.S. President Donald Trump has indicated that he's not ruling out the possibility of war with Venezuela. Trump has also announced plans for additional seizures of oil tankers near Venezuela following the recent capture of a sanctioned tanker off of its coast. The U.S. has intensified its pressure on President Nicolas Maduro's government, targeting Venezuela's oil exports, the nation's primary income source. Meanwhile, the United States has also deployed advanced military aircraft, including F-35 stealth fighter jets, to Puerto Rico as part of a significant military buildup in the Caribbean. Trump has ordered a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering or leaving Venezuela, a move that has sparked backlash from Maduro, who claims the U.S. is attempting to seize control of Venezuela's vast oil reserves. The situation remains tense, with Trump previously hinting at the potential for land strikes in Venezuela. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Ambassador Vishwanathan. She's a former ambassador to Venezuela, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, looking at all this escalation, what can happen if this continues?
Well, America has the power, the inclination to attack Venezuela as they did in Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam. They have the firepower, and Venezuela in no position to resisted to defend itself. So it's a difficult situation. Brazil and Mexico, they are calling upon United States to exercise restraint, because today it would be Venezuela, tomorrow they would go after Brazil or go after Mexico. So the regime change operation of United States against leftist governments, it's a permanent agenda. It's been going on from the 1950s onwards. It's only the latest instance.
Thank you for sharing that. And the warnings we have heard, how does this possibility of military action affect U.S. Venezuela relations, also U.S. Latin America relations?
Latin Americans have the unfortunate history of interventions, invasions, occupations, and regime change operations by United States over so many decades from the Cold War time onwards. So it's an unfortunate tragedy. And they had been supporting military dictatorships. They had been destabilizing democratic governments on the leftist side. Now, in this case, in the case of Venezuela, it is the oil. The Americans, they want to get their hands on the Venezuelan oil. They want to change the leftist government of Venezuela and put a pro-American CIA asset called Maria Corina Machado, who was given wrongly Nobel Prize by Norway.
How do you think, to what extent can military pressure influence political change in Venezuela? How effective is U.S.'s current strategy?
When United States is all powerful, Venezuela doesn't have the military strength, and even the moral strength they do not have, because President Maduro had been rigging elections, and so they don't have the moral standing. But the thing is, the region is worried, including President Lula and President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico and President Gustavo Petro of Colombia, that if the Americans do this regime change in Venezuela, and they might go after Cuba next, and then to Brazil and to Mexico. So, so they are very worried. They are very concerned.
With that, I would like to thank retired Ambassador Vishwanathan for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump's Justice Department is facing a deadline to release a massive trove of documents from its investigations into the late financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, after Congress overwhelmingly approved a new law forcing their disclosure last month. That legislation followed months of political wrangling as well as rebellion by some of Trump's staunchest supporters over his administration's month-long reluctance to make the records public. According to sources, attorneys in the Justice Department's National Security Division were ordered to review the materials and redact them in preparation for their release. Trump had initially urged Republicans who control both chambers of Congress to oppose the law, arguing that releasing potentially sensitive internal investigative records could set a dangerous precedent. He publicly reversed course just before the vote, even as the White House quietly lobbied senators to slow walk passage of the bill. Now we welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, how frustrated are American citizens towards this ongoing investigation?
Well, pretty frustrated. It's taking long. The so-called redaction bottleneck. There's hundreds of thousands of pages that have to be manually inspected, and the identities of victims need to be protected, and there needs to be no defamation, and et cetera, et cetera. It's taking much longer than anybody anticipated. Americans at both extremes of the political continuum are frustrated because they think that this Epstein file is going to advance their cause. People on the far left, the progressives, tend to view this as it's going to be all about Trump. It's going to be all about Republicans, and people on the far right think it's going to be the Bill Gateses of this world and the Noam Chomskys and various other figures, prominent figures on the political left. Both are going to be both disappointed and elated because it's going to be an equal opportunity indictment, I think, of across the political spectrum. But yes, Americans are growing frustrated. They really want to see the results of this file.
You know, the latest pictures that were disclosed, it really didn't make much change. It was like basically some of the pictures were already the pictures which were already in public before. Do you think they're kind of filtering out and just trying to wishy-washy, maybe wait until this fizzles out? The government thinks that this will fizzle out somehow. What are they trying to do right now?
I don't think it's about fizzling out. I think it's about drip feeding to keep this story on the front pages and in the news. And also, that's the primary objective, so that Americans don't forget that this investigation is underway, this report is forthcoming, and it keeps the heat on, as it were. It also helps frame this, though, in the sense that there's a narrative that's being supported by this drip feed of these images, which is that the rich and powerful, in whatever camp one thinks is the enemy camp, the rich and powerful are guilty of heinous crimes against young women and are involved in a corruption scandal. It's not just sexual scandal, it's a corruption scandal involving Epstein. And so it's both a drip feed to keep it on the front pages, but also a drip feed to frame it in a particular way that suits one's political views and advances one's political agenda.
100%. Thank you very much for highlighting. And once again, joining us, Mr. Professor Andrew Latham from Minneapolis. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that US President Donald Trump was right to sue the BBC over edited clips of his speech. This comes as Trump sued Britain's publicly owned broadcaster for at least $10 billion in damages over edited clips of a speech that made it appear he directed supporters to storm the US Capitol. The BBC has apologized to Trump and has said that it will defend the case. Following these developments, the BBC has announced a shake-up of a key editorial committee following criticism of how the broadcaster handled concerns about the editing of the Donald Trump speech and other issues. An internal review published said BBC executives did not act quickly or decisively enough following the discovery of the misleading edit of the speech. The row over the edit sparked the resignations of the BBC's Director General and Head of News last month and led to a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit from President Trump. Let's listen into what the Russian president has shared.
Они там сами и разбираются. Я не хочу там, знаете, сыпать вам соль на раны. Не хочу касаться этой темы. Хотя это, конечно, проблема есть. Значит, недостоверного освещения информации и подтасовок. Но это очевидно. Я думаю, что президент Трамп прав.
Now we move on to Asia. China has urged Japan to make a clean break with militarism and pursue peaceful development, warning that recent actions by Tokyo have alarmed neighboring countries. Speaking at a regular press conference in Beijing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Jiakun said Japan's recent militarization moves and comments on Taiwan have raised vigilance and opposition across the region. He pointed to remarks made by Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi in early November, as a key concern. Spokesperson Guo has said that history shows that a return to militarism would be a dead end for Japan, recalling the heavy cost borne by the Japanese people at the end of the Second World War. Let's listen into what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has shared.
80年前，日本人民得到的是一张战争能够胜利的空头支票，背负的却是完全失败的惨痛代价。历史和现实证明，重走军国主义是邪路，也注定是一条死路。 与军国主义彻底切割，真心走和平发展道路，是日本获得国际社会，特别是亚洲近邻信任与理解的重要前提，也是符合日本人民根本利益的。
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Sumit Peer. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, looking at this ongoing China-Japan escalations, the latest one, how do you analyze the current Japan-China relations?
You see, ma'am, it's pretty simple. China wants to bully around everybody. Americans have a lot of bases in Japan, the air bases and naval bases. And if there's a conflict over Taiwan or over anything in the region, now if Americans go and fight Chinese in the South China Sea, which will be very ideal for America to do and not ideal for China to do, the Japan is the force which will decide who will win and lose. Because when you need refueling, when you need air support, and when you need all the logistic support that is going to come from Japan. And if you refer to the National Security Document of America, it clearly says you have to increase cooperation with Japan, India, Australia, and South Korea, and even Philippines to how to boost your resources and make sure China is confined to South China Sea only. Because if China is able to leave the South China Sea, break through the first island chain, and reach Pacific, then China can cause havoc in Europe and in America. So in the supreme interest of the world and in America, it is very important to confine China in the South China Sea. And when China is talking about, I will do the blockade of Taiwan, you know, Japan is 70 miles away. At some points, it's 110 miles away. So if there's a blockade of Taiwan, that means an automatic blockade of Japan. When you have 95% of your energy coming in from China, Straits of Taiwan, so if you block them, you are literally blocking Japan. And when Japan is trying to defend itself, Japan is increasing its forces. They are trying to deploy their missiles. They are trying to beef up their defenses. China doesn't like this because China knows if all these nations get together, they can't be defeated. And Japan has a pact with America. If Japan is attacked, America has to come and defect it. So as the Philippines. Now, what is China doing? They're trying to mess around with Japan. They're trying to warn Japan and tell them, oh, what happened in World War II? Don't forget that. The things have changed today. They're trying to mess around with Philippines. They are trying to send those hot and cold messages to India. Now, after the new national strategy or the security document of America, the things have changed because Americans now recognize the number one threat is People's Republic of China. For India, the number one threat is People's Republic of China. And even for the Russians, the number one threat is People's Republic of China. Now, Communist Party of China is rattled. They exactly don't know what to do. They are trying to scare out the lady Prime Minister of Japan who has just taken over the office, just trying to send a message, oh, don't think of military, you will be crushed, we'll defeat you, we'll end you, we'll do all that. I believe Japan has the right of self-defense. I believe Japan has every right to protect its disputed territories. I believe this is Chinese hegemony and this is Chinese imperialistic designs where they want to constantly expand their territory. China cannot bully people. They cannot blockade of, they can't do a forcible union of Taiwan and expect the world to be silent. That is what is happening right now. And what Chinese do, they want to win a war without fighting it. The best way to do that is scare the enemy. Scare him to the extent they decide not to fight with you. But I don't think Japan under Ms. Takashaki is going to decide that. I think her vision is clear. She's going to beef up the defense. She's going to put more money on the defense. I think more than what NATO is doing right now. She is getting long-range missiles. She has a hotline with Trump. With all those things happening, for the first time, China is seeing a very powerful lady leader from Japan. And to add on to that, Chinese usually do not like women who are upfront, who are powerful, and who are decisive. So it's a double whammy for Chinese Communist Party to fathom.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for highlighting. And Mr. Sumit, lastly, how do you see the regional implications of this Japan's military posture, increasing military posture, as well as Taiwan's military posture and China's military posture in South China Sea, particularly around Japan and Korea and Taiwan?
Look, if you have a problem with Taiwan, Japan is going to get automatically impacted. So what Japan is trying to say, if there is a problem with Taiwan and you try to use force vis-a-vis Taiwan, we have to get into the business because we don't have option. China has a powerful military, but if you look at America, then supported by Japan, South Korea, Philippines, and with a docking agreement in China with India, I don't think Chinese have any chance. Because if you look at the WDMMA ratings today, even today, Indian Air Force with lesser number of planes is rated over the Chinese Air Force. Now, if India and America work along with Japan and work with South Korea, I think Chinese do not have a chance, and Russia is not going to come and fight for China. They will never come and fight for China and pick up a fight with Americans. They're not going to do that. So Xi Jinping is thinking that his only fame to success is reunification of Taiwan, and when those things are being called out by the lady Prime Minister of Japan in the public, and the Chinese people somewhere down the line are hearing it, this is a battle of egos. This is a war of, I am trying to build a perception, and there's a lady who comes and pinches my my balloon. She doesn't like that, and Trump telling her, you have a hotline with me, reach to me anytime. India is kind of also supporting Taiwan. India is not in favor of having a war, though India wants peace. But push comes to shove, will also help Taiwan, will also help Americans in doing this. China is not a friendly country to us. Everybody knows China is a hostile power. Now China is suddenly getting caught up in the South China Sea, and for China it is very important to fight in Pacific. Push comes to shove, not in the South China Sea, because as long as China fights in the South China Sea, the Chinese economy will get more and more dwindled out. And today, when the inflations, if you look at the PMI, if you look at the if you look at the drop in consumer sales, car sales, white goods sales, the Chinese domestic demand is quite kind of shrinking. The only feather in the cap is export demand. But if you have a fight in the South China Sea, or around South China Sea, that that last lifeline of Chinese economy will also be cut. So China is trying very best to scare the enemies away. But I think what Japan is doing and what Taiwan is doing, that is the way to do. China's hegemonic designs cannot be let happen. China cannot call and decide who lives and who dies in the world. This has to be very clear.
Thank you very much. Very well said and excellent commentary. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Peer, and joining us on NewsX World. Now we move on to Europe. Greek authorities have rescued 545 migrants from a fishing vessel off of the island of Gavdos in one of the largest operations in recent months. The Coast Guard received a distressed call early today and launched a major rescue with Frontex and commercial ships. All migrants were brought to safety to Crete and were reported to be in good health. The rescue comes as arrivals from Libya surge towards Greece's southernmost islands. Gavdos, with fewer than 100 residents, has become a key target for smugglers exploiting gaps in Mediterranean surveillance. More than 7,300 migrants have reached Crete and Gavdos in the first half of 2025, already surpassing last year's total. Greece has tightened migration controls, suspended asylum processing for some arrivals, and stepped up naval patrols with EU support. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.